Okay, so we are back here with our mesh code that will automatically blend with the landscape and then allow you to pass through it, right? Except that we can't pass through it. So I did a lot of digging and discussion in the forums, and the issue is, like, just put in simple words if you wanted to skip ahead. It's just not possible to change the landscape object type. See here, like object type set word static, right? Doesn't matter what you do, you can't set this to anything. You can create a new object type, and you can also let's do it. So you create a new object type, you can do any configuration you want, and the game just completely ignores it, right? So let's just call it ABC, right? We have an object type, let's call ABC. Then we're gonna set our blueprint to ABC. We're gonna set it to ignore absolutely everything, right? So the collision type is ABC, the object type, and then it's ignoring absolutely everything. Now you just add a cube here. You can just bring this cube here. Yep. Set the cube collision. If I can find it. I'm blind. Here. So set to custom. Right? And then in the cube default is word dynamic. And you're gonna set to ignore everything also, and block only word static, right? So just to recap, we have a landscape that is set to object type ABC, and then it's ignoring absolutely everything. And we have a cube that's set to word dynamic, and it is ignoring word static, right? So in both directions, the cube for the land for the cube, they are ignoring each other. Except that, let's just apply simulate physics here. If you run it, it still collides, right? And you can see it there to pass right through it. So that's because the engine completely ignores what you set for the collision profile. It's going to always be word static, which is not an issue actually, because we were creating a new object type called landscape or whatever, and using this as a channel. You don't need it, you just need to consider the word static itself as a landscape, right? So I'm going to demonstrate how it should be, and then you're gonna do all the steps to make it for our blueprint here. So the landscape by default is just set to block all, and we don't care really because the object type is word static. That's the only thing we need to worry about. So in our profile that we're gonna make, let me reset this to default and delete the object that I created. Right, so let's just put everything back to default, right? And this is block all. Okay, now I can just come here in the settings and remove this. Whoops, here. You can create your channel, but don't think about create a channel for the landscape. You can create a channel for your cube or for your pawn or for anything else. It works perfectly. Just don't try to apply it to the landscape. So now everything is colliding, everything is as it should, and we still can't pass over that hole over there, right? So the cube doesn't fall and we don't fall. So how are we gonna handle this? So let me put it on top here just to demonstrate. So if we said that the landscape gonna always be word static, we just need to ignore word static, right? And our object itself can be word dynamic. Anything else that is not word static. So now now, if I run this, you see the cube fall through the stairs, right? So that is what we need to do with our pawn. So just put the cube over there, and we go to our character, to our capsule component, and then the collision preset, which is not as it should be. For whatever reason, it should be pawn. It's still it's loading old values, so I need to refresh this somehow. Okay, now it's updated. So we reset. Okay, now it's the correct one. So by default it's pawn, right? And its object type is pawn, and that's fine. So what we're gonna do is leave as is, like collision here, and then leave as pawn, everything as it is. We're just going to ignore word static. Save, run. So you see we still collide with the blueprint, gonna still collide with the cube, but we're gonna be able to go down the stairs, right? And of course, if you go outside, you're gonna fall because you're ignoring word static. So we're just gonna do this dynamically, right? We're just going to make a profile that has word static set to off, and then we switch between profiles, so it will basically switch in the interaction between on and off here. That's what we're gonna do, and that was the idea before, but I was trying to add a land collision because it's just normal why you think it should work. Anyway, so first thing first, let's make our profile. You can create a channel if you want collision, but create it thinking about the character, the pawn, whatever you want, a new channel. Don't try to change the landscape channel, that doesn't work. So just gonna call it like ghost pawn profile, whatever, you can call it whatever, right? And there's some things here you need to pay attention. So you can't leave this as no collision, otherwise it will just ignore everything, right? For the pawn, you really want to leave it as normal, which is collision and enable query physics. That's the default. It's most expensive one, but then it's your character, right? So you need this to be as is. The type will be pawn. If you create a new type here for the pawn, you could use that type here, but it's not needed really. And you can leave everything as you would like, and then just make sure you are ignoring word static. And that should be basically it, right? So just to test it, can go to our third person, right? Just clicking something else to update the component. Set the profile, right? So now I'm not changing specifically, I'm changing the profile itself. I'm gonna run. It's working, and it's working here. So now we're gonna set it back to pawn. Gonna keep working, and we don't fall anymore. So we're just gonna do this dynamically. So let's start with our mesh hole here. Let's do one improvement. So we have the material here, right, as a variable. And if you want to have this dynamic like I have, but you don't want to keep setting the same material over and over again, and then you just want to set it when you actually need a new material, you can set it the full value here, right? So it will have this by default, right? You can do the same with the mesh, right? The mesh could be by default a cube, right? And same for the no, the overlay is already at the full. Okay, so in that way you don't need to keep remaking the setting the material and setting the shape every single time. And if you want, it's still dynamic. You can still change in a scenario that you need. Second thing, this overlay is still too bright, even though it's just 0.2. We're gonna try 0.1. Still too bright. 0.5. Okay, now it's barely visible. And okay, so what we need to do? First thing, we have your character, any character that you have, or first person, third person, whatever you are using. So we want to talk with this guy to set the profile, right? So to do this like in a most correct way, to print interface, there it is. Nice. Blueprint interface, pawn, profile, collision, set, something like that. Call it whatever. So this is just so you don't have to directly call it. You can cast it and it won't be an issue for this case. I'm gonna explain later. But this is just to make it neat, right? And then you can keep using this pattern for anything else, right? So set pawn profile to ghost profile. Quite describing this. I can't spell it. Quite descriptive name. Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Then reset pawn profile to pawn. Whoops. Save, compile. It's just a declaration. It doesn't do anything by itself. So you go into third person, click on class default and class settings, sorry, and find the interface and just select your interface. It will now show here those two events. So just double click in both of them and you're going to grab this. Just make sure it is working. I'm just going to say print string. So this is the set profile and this is the reset, right? So print string reset profile. Now nothing will happen, right, if we run this, because we just create that and then we're not calling it from anywhere. So now what you need to do is go to your hole or whatever you call it, the blueprint that has the meshes for the virtual texture. The second one, right, is just overlay. We set the collision to no collision, which is fine, and then we also hide this in game and then it's never there. The first one, it is set to no collision with generate overlap, but the way the overlap work is it only generates overlaps with something that has overlap, and no collision means everything is set to ignore, even though this panel doesn't show everything is set to ignore, right? So it will not generate anything. So what you want to do in the mesh component that you're using is set it to custom, right? And then the collision, just select query only, because we don't need to do the other expensive stuff, right? The default is collision, query, and physics, but this is expensive, and then we are not doing any physics calculation. We just need to know, okay, the pawn enter the area, the pawn leave the area. So we just need to query it. Object type cannot be word static because we are ignoring word static on the profile, remember? So if we swap the the pawn profile to the ghost, it will ignore word static, then it will never detect the pawn again. So object type will be word dynamic. Then you set it to ignore everything and set it to overlap with the pawn. You can have it overlap with anything else if you want, like interactive other stuff. So you can have like an object falling through the stairs and this kind of stuff, but for now, so you want to ignore most of the stuff that you don't need to do calculations, just to not like hang your engine for too long. The important thing is that we are overlapping anything that you want to change the profile. That's how you need to think about it. So I have a ball, and then this ball needs to fall to the stair, and it has its own object type. So you need to make sure you set the overlap on that object. Okay, so that is for this. We won't generate the overlap object. It won't do anything yet. So you still need to begin overlap and overlap. That's not it. Event actor begin overlap. Event actor and overlap. Okay, I was blind. And this is the part where we go over the casting, right? So you could do this, right? So cast to pp third person character, right? And you're gonna see people saying that casting is bad because this of that, and then you need to understand. So it's bad if whatever you're casting is not loaded. So third person character is the character, so the character has to be loaded, so this cast won't be like a huge performance issue. But if you are casting to something that is not loaded, then it needs to go and load that blueprint, and then if that blueprint has a lot of dependence, it also needs to load all the other dependents. So that's why the casting, in that case, the casting is bad, right? So in our case, it doesn't matter, but I still won't use the casts just to keep like the good practice, right? So we just need to call the functions that we made, which I forgot the name. So set pawn profile ghost, right? So we just need to set pawn profile to ghost, right? And then we connect this, and here we do backwards. So reset pawn profile back to, and we do this. So what this does is, if the object overlapping has the interface, it will call the interface. If the object doesn't have the interface, well, we just ignore it without doing any cast. So it doesn't need to load anything. So if I did not miss anything, it should work when I come here, and did not work. So what are we missing? So we have the actions being called. We have the print string here. We have this set to custom generate overlap event. It is overlapping with the pawn, and the pawn is set to pawn. That should be all, really. Oh, it did something there. I think I'm using the wrong event. Yeah, it's calling, but it's not calling the begin. Why is it not calling the begin? Set pawn profile to ghost profile, and I'm gonna call it. Oh yeah, that's the testing. Yeah, that's the issue when you do testing. set profile to ghost. Yeah, that's the one. We're just calling the wrong event. For a second, if what was doing something wrong. So in your case, you probably have only one, and then you won't have this confusion. I have two because I was testing before, and I was really confused with it worked. Why it's not working anymore? So yeah, it's working fine. And you have this cube. I have this cube here just to show that the cube doesn't crash, and that we don't have any issue with it interacting with the overlap, because the cube does not implement that interface. And also the cube is more dynamic, right? But even if we go to our mesh here and set to interactive word dynamic, because the cube don't have the interface, it won't crash, it won't do anything, it just ignores it. Let's see, it works just fine. And now we know when we enter and then we leave the area. That's the only thing we need, really. So now that we can detect this, I'm gonna leave the print for now, just for showing. So the only thing we need to do is grab the capsule component, right? Set collision profile name. And here you need to type it exactly as it should be. So make sure you spell it correctly or just copy it, which is what I'm going to do. Just copy, paste it, right? And then we're just gonna do exactly the same thing down here, which I'm just gonna set it back to PON. And we have this overlap update. I'm pretty sure you don't want this on, because we're gonna swap the profile, which will cause it to trigger again. We'll test it and see what happens. So now I'm outside, I collide with the land, enter, we see that, and we go down the stair. See, now I don't have collision with the land anymore. But if I jump outside, I still collide with the land, because now the land is back there. And that's basically what we want to achieve, right? See, the cube here is still working fine. And yeah, that's basically it. Let me just move this out of the way. That is basically what you need to do. Of course, you need to design a better stair where you can fit. Anyway, okay, that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have any suggestion or idea, feel free to leave it down.